Dr. Elias Carter wiped the sweat from his brow as he adjusted the light on his helmet. The underground chamber was ancient, untouched for what felt like thousands of years. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by his careful steps. The ruins around him whispered stories of a lost civilization, their faded carvings speaking a language no human had ever heard before. "This is it," he muttered to himself, his voice echoing in the silence. He ran a gloved hand over the smooth, dark metal of an enormous doorway. Unlike the rest of the ruins, this door looked different, almost alive, pulsing faintly with energy. His fingers traced the strange symbols carved into the frame. His translator AI tried to decode the words, but all it could translate was, "She must never rise again." A chill ran down Elias' spine. Warnings like these usually meant something important. A buried treasure, a lost weapon, or maybe something far worse. But fear had never stopped him before. He had dedicated his life to uncovering the past, and this was the greatest discovery of his career. Dr. Carter, his assistant, Ravi, called from the entrance. "We're detecting an energy spike from that chamber. Should we stop?" Elias hesitated. He should stop. Every instinct told him that whatever lay behind this door was not meant to be disturbed. But if he turned back now, someone else would find it later. He had to be the first. "I'm opening it," Elias declared. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small plasma cutter. As the tool flared to life, he carefully cut through the ancient locking mechanism. Sparks flew, the sound of metal sizzling and cracking filling the chamber. Then the door shifted, not like a broken piece of machinery, but like a living thing waking from slumber. A deep, humming sound filled the room as ancient gears turned, and the door slid open on its own. A gust of cold air rushed out, sending a shiver down Elias' spine. Inside, bathed in eerie blue light, stood a massive stasis pod. It was sleek, made of a crystalline material, and filled with a glowing liquid. And inside it, a woman floated. She was tall and otherworldly beautiful, with dark silver skin and long flowing hair that shimmered like molten metal. Golden tattoos lined her arms and forehead, symbols that pulsed with energy. She wore regal armor, the kind only royalty or warriors of legend would possess. Elias stepped closer, heart pounding. "Who are you?" he whispered. Suddenly, the pod's lights flared. The symbols on the walls lit up, as if responding to her presence. Alarms blared, ancient mechanisms whirring to life. The ground beneath them shook. And then, her eyes snapped open. A brilliant golden gaze locked onto Elias, filled with power, confusion, and something else. She had awoken, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Elias took a step back as the woman's golden eyes locked onto him. For a moment, she didn't move, just floated inside the strange liquid, staring at him like she was seeing a ghost. Then the stasis pod shuddered. Cracks spread across the crystal-like surface, glowing with energy. "Oh no," Elias whispered. With a loud crack, the pod shattered. A rush of glowing liquid poured out, spilling onto the floor like liquid light. The woman fell forward, her body collapsing, but Elias instinctively lunged forward and caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was cold, her armor slick with the strange fluid. She gasped for air, her body trembling, and then suddenly she gripped his arm. Her strength was shocking. Her fingers dug into his suit, and her golden eyes burned with something ancient and powerful. "Where am I?" Her voice was low, rough, like someone who hadn't spoken in centuries. Elias swallowed hard. You're in an underground ruin. I just found you." The woman blinked, looking around. Her breathing was uneven, as if she was trying to remember something long forgotten. Then her gaze returned to Elias. "You freed me." Elias hesitated. "Yes." A strange expression crossed her face, something between relief and fear. Then the ground shook violently. Alarms blared across the chamber. Ancient mechanisms roared to life, and the ruins around them began to collapse. Massive stone slabs broke apart, falling from the ceiling. Dust filled the air. "Elias, what's happening?" Ravi's voice crackled through the comms. "I don't know. The whole place is coming down," Elias shouted back. The woman suddenly stood up, her movements surprisingly strong for someone who had just woken from what seemed like eternal sleep. She looked up at the collapsing ceiling, then stretched out a hand. The golden tattoos on her arms flared with energy. A shockwave of golden light burst from her palm, and for a brief second, time itself seemed to freeze. The falling debris hovered in midair, as if held by an invisible force. Elias' jaw dropped. The woman turned to him. "We must leave. Now." Elias didn't argue. He grabbed his pack and tapped his comms. "Ravi, get the ship ready. We're coming in hot." "Who's we?" Ravi asked, confused. "No time. Just do it," Elias shouted. The woman extended her hand. Elias hesitated, then took it. The moment their hands touched, a pulse of energy surrounded them both. Before Elias could even understand what was happening, they were ripped from the ruins, floating, moving at impossible speed, until they landed right at the entrance where Ravi stood waiting, eyes wide with shock. The ruins behind them collapsed completely, sealing whatever ancient secrets lay below. The woman turned to face Elias. "You have no idea what you've just done, human." Elias exhaled, heart still pounding. "No," he admitted, "but I have a feeling I'm about to find out." Elias stood outside the ruins, breathing heavily. Dust and debris filled the air behind him. The ancient tomb now buried forever. The woman, whoever she was, had just saved them with a power he couldn't begin to understand. Ravi stared at her in shock. "Who? What is she?" The woman lifted her chin, her golden eyes scanning the alien sky above them. She took a deep breath, as if tasting the air for the first time in centuries. Then she turned to Elias and Ravi, her expression unreadable. "I am Selera, daughter of the Eternal Throne, rightful heir to the Zyrith dominion," she said, her voice filled with quiet authority. "And I have been betrayed." Elias exchanged a glance with Ravi. Zyrith dominion. That name didn't exist in any modern galactic records. "How long were you in that stasis pod?" Elias asked carefully. Zelera's glowing tattoos pulsed for a moment as she closed her eyes. "Too long," she murmured. "But if you are human, then far longer than I feared." Ravi stepped forward, still wary. "Look, lady, I don't know who you are, but we need to get off this planet before more trouble shows up." Zelera's gaze snapped to him. "Trouble is already here." As if on cue, Elias' comm unit beeped with an urgent alert. His ship's AI spoke through the earpiece. "Warning. Unidentified warships detected in orbit. Incoming hostiles." Elias cursed. "That's fast. Someone must have picked up the energy surge when we opened the chamber." Zelera's expression darkened. "They come to ensure I remain buried." A deep rumble echoed from the sky as 3 massive ships broke through the clouds, their sleek black hulls gleaming under the sun. The Zyrith insignia, an ancient symbol Elias had seen in the ruins, was still emblazoned on their sides. "They're from your empire," Elias realized. Zelera's golden eyes burned with anger. "No, they are from the traitors who stole my throne." The warships opened fire. Explosions erupted around them, sending rocks and debris flying. Elias grabbed Zelera's wrist and pulled her toward his ship. "I hope you're not too royal to run, because we need to go now." Zelera didn't argue. She moved like a warrior, sprinting alongside them as blaster fire rained down. Ravi hit the controls on the ship's ramp, and the hatch opened just as they leaped inside. "Get us in the air," Elias shouted. Ravi jumped into the pilot's seat and activated the thrusters. The ship roared to life, lifting off just as another explosion rocked the ground where they had been standing moments ago. Inside the cockpit, Zelera watched the enemy ships with clenched fists. "They fear me," she said softly. They should. Elias exhaled. Lady, I don't know what kind of war you just woke up into, but welcome to the future. The battle for her empire had begun. The ship rattled violently as blaster fire streaked past, lighting up the sky like a deadly storm. Elias gripped the edge of his seat, watching as Ravi pushed the controls to full throttle. The small research vessel wasn't built for combat, but right now, running was the only option. Shields at 30%. Ravi shouted over the alarms. We can't take another hit like that. Elias turned to Xelara, who stood perfectly still, staring at the enemy warships through the viewport. Unlike him and Ravi, who were panicking, she looked calm, as if she had seen this all before. Can you do something about this? Elias asked desperately. Xelara didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped forward and placed her hand on the console. Her golden tattoos glowed brighter, and suddenly, the ship's entire control system flickered. What the? Ravi gasped as the screens flashed strange alien symbols before returning to normal. I have synchronized with your vessel, Xelara said, her voice firm. Fly straight. Do not turn. That's suicide, Ravi argued. They'll blow us to bits. Xelara lifted her other hand. The air around her hummed with energy. Trust me. For reasons he didn't understand, Elias did. Do it, Ravi. Ravi cursed under his breath but obeyed. The ship surged forward, heading straight for the enemy blockade. The warships locked on, targeting systems flashing. Then, Xelara closed her fist. A pulse of golden energy exploded outward, invisible yet powerful. Instantly, the enemy warship's weapons flickered and died. Their engines stuttered, lights across their hulls short-circuited, and for a brief, unbelievable moment, they were completely powerless. Elias' eyes widened. You just disabled them. Xelara nodded. Their ships run on ancient Cyrithian core tech. My bloodline has control over it. Ravi let out a disbelieving laugh. Remind me never to mess with you. The enemy warships, now adrift and powerless, shrank behind them as their ship broke through the planet's atmosphere and into the vastness of space. We're clear, Ravi announced. For now. Elias turned to Xelara. All right, princess, time for answers. Who exactly are these guys, and why do they want you dead? Xelara's expression darkened. She looked at the swirling void of space as if seeing ghosts from the past. They are the false rulers of my people. Long ago, my own council betrayed me, afraid of the power I carried. They exiled me, locking me away so they could rule in my place. She looked back at Elias. But now that I have returned, they will stop at nothing to destroy me. Elias exhaled. Great, so now we're fugitives. Xelara gave a small, fierce smile. No, we are the beginning of a war. And in that moment, Elias knew he had just stepped into something far bigger than himself. Elias leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples as the ship cruised through deep space. The adrenaline from their escape was wearing off, replaced by the heavy realization of what had just happened. He had freed a lost alien princess, anchored an entire empire, and was now a fugitive in the galaxy. Just another normal day in the life of an archaeologist. Ravi sat at the controls, watching the scanners. No sign of pursuit, yet, he muttered. But it won't take them long to track us. Elias turned to Xelara, who stood near the viewport, her golden eyes glowing faintly as she gazed into the stars. Despite everything, she seemed unshaken. You haven't told us what your plan is, Elias said. What do we do now? Xelara didn't look at him. I must reclaim my throne. Elias scoffed. Right. And how do you plan to do that? You've been asleep for, what, 1,000 years. The empire has moved on. Your enemies are in control. You're just one person. Xelara finally turned, and the intensity in her gaze made Elias stop talking. I am not just anyone, human, she said calmly. I am the last true heir of the eternal throne. The blood of my ancestors runs through me, and with it, their power. As if to prove her point, she lifted her hand, and her golden tattoos flared to life. The very air around her hummed with energy. A nearby data pad on the table levitated, floating in midair before gently setting itself down. Elias and Ravi exchanged a glance. "Yeah, okay," Ravi muttered. "That's not normal." Elias crossed his arms. "So you've got some fancy magic tricks. That won't be enough to fight an empire." Zelera stepped closer, her voice like steel. "There are still those who remain loyal to me. My people were not always ruled by cowards and traitors. There were warriors, true warriors, who stood by my side." "And you think they're still alive?" Elias asked. Zelera nodded. "Perhaps not the ones I knew, but their descendants, those who still believe in the old ways. If we find them, we rise together." Ravi sighed. "Great. So now we're looking for ancient rebels. Any idea where to start?" Zelera closed her eyes, reaching out with her power. The golden glow around her intensified, and suddenly, the ship's navigation screen shifted, coordinates appearing as if placed there by an unseen force. "A hidden moon," she said softly. "It was once a sanctuary for my warriors." She opened her eyes. "If they are still out there, this is where we will find them." Elias exhaled, shaking his head. What had he gotten himself into? But deep down, a small part of him was excited. A lost empire, a hidden rebellion, an exiled princess fighting to reclaim her throne. And somehow, he was right in the middle of it. The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and before them lay a dark, desolate moon. It hung in space like a forgotten relic, its surface covered in jagged mountains and deep craters. No lights, no cities, just silence. Elias leaned forward, staring at the screen. "This is your great warrior sanctuary. It looks abandoned." Zelera's golden eyes flickered with determination. "Appearances deceive, human. My people were masters of secrecy. If they still exist, they are watching us right now." Ravi shivered. "That's not creepy at all." Elias sighed. "All right, let's take a closer look, but keep the engines warm. We might need to leave fast." The ship descended, cutting through the moon's thin atmosphere. The scanners picked up faint energy signatures deep beneath the surface. A hidden base, a ruin. Something was alive down there. They landed in a rocky canyon, the ground covered in dust that hadn't been disturbed in centuries. Stepping onto the surface, Elias felt the eerie weight of history pressing down on him. "Stay close," he warned. "I don't like this." Zelera stepped forward, her golden tattoos glowing faintly. She knelt and placed her hand on the ground, closing her eyes. The air shifted, as if the very planet was holding its breath. Then the ground rumbled. Elias and Ravi stumbled back as cracks formed in the rocky surface. Slowly, massive stone doors slid open, revealing a hidden passage leading deep underground. "Whoa," Ravi whispered. "That's some next-level security." Zelera stood. The old ways remain. Without hesitation, she walked inside. Elias exhaled. "I have a bad feeling about this." But he followed. The sanctuary below. The tunnel was ancient, carved with glowing symbols that pulsed as they passed. The deeper they went, the warmer it became, as if something powerful still breathed within these walls. Then suddenly, they weren't alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, weapons raised. They wore dark armor with the same golden markings as Zelera, their faces hidden behind helmets. One stepped forward, his voice rough with suspicion. "Who dares enter the Hall of the Forgotten?" Zelera lifted her chin. "I am Zelera, daughter of the Eternal Throne. I have returned to reclaim what was stolen." Silence. Then the warriors lowered their weapons. The leader hesitated, then removed his helmet, revealing a scared face and piercing silver eyes. "We thought you were a myth," he murmured. Zelera's gaze hardened. "I am no myth. I am here to finish what was started." Elias felt a chill. The warriors, they believed in her. And just like that, the first sparks of rebellion had begun. The warriors in the underground sanctuary stared at Zelera, their eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and awe. For centuries, they had heard stories of the lost princess, the one who would return and lead them back to their rightful place. But no one had expected her to be standing before them, alive and well, after all this time. The leader of the group, a tall man with silver scars running across his face, took a step forward. The tales spoke of the return of the one true ruler, he said, his voice filled with reverence. But we thought it was nothing more than a legend. Zelera's golden eyes flashed. It is no legend. I have come to reclaim my throne, and I need your help to do so. Elias and Ravi stood off to the side, watching the exchange. Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of awe himself. These warriors were the last remnants of Zelera's loyal followers, people who had waited for her return, perhaps even sacrificed everything for this moment. Ravi whispered to Elias, "Is this really happening? Are we about to fight an empire with this?" He waved his hand toward the warriors. Elias shrugged. "I don't know, but she's got the power, and they believe in her. That's more than we had 5 hours ago." Zelera looked at the leader, her expression intense. "You know what must be done. The empire won't stop until I am dead. They are already hunting me. But with your warriors, we can take back what is mine." The leader, who had introduced himself as Terran, nodded slowly. "We have waited long for this day, Zelera. But we are not just warriors anymore. We are the last of the old blood. Many of our people are scattered, and we are few." Zelera's expression softened, but her voice was still steady. "I understand. But the people are still out there. The truth is still out there. We will find them, unite them, and show the empire that their false rule ends now." Terran hesitated for a moment before lowering his head. "You speak the truth. We will stand with you, princess." With those words, the warriors lowered their weapons, the tension in the room lifting. They had taken their oath. Zelera was no longer a lost princess. She was their leader, their queen. Elias could feel the shift in the air. What started as an escape from one disaster had quickly turned into something much larger. This was no longer just about survival. This was about rebellion, about taking back what was rightfully hers. Terran raised his voice to address the others. "Prepare yourselves. We will move quickly. The empire must not know we are awake." The warriors nodded and began moving, gathering equipment, checking weapons, and preparing for the long journey ahead. The underground sanctuary buzzed with life, the echoes of an ancient war being awakened once more. Zelera turned to Elias and Ravi. "You must understand. We are no longer just allies. You are part of this now." Elias met her gaze. "What do you need from us?" Zelera's golden eyes glimmered. "You will help me find the rest of my people. You will help me lead them to victory." Elias felt the weight of her words. Victory. It seemed impossible, but for the first time, it felt like there might be a chance. "All right," Elias said. "Let's do this." Ravi clapped him on the back. "This is insane, but yeah, let's do it." The rebellion had begun. The underground sanctuary buzzed with activity. Warriors, once hidden in the shadows of history, were now preparing for something far greater than they had ever expected. The return of their true ruler, Zelera. The silence of their exile was over, and now they were ready to fight. Elias and Ravi watched as the warriors worked quickly, gathering supplies and preparing for the long journey ahead. The air was thick with tension, but also with hope, hope that had been lost for centuries. Zelera stood at the center of it all, speaking with Terran, the leader of the warriors. Their conversation was quiet, but Elias could see the determination in Zelera's eyes. She wasn't just the princess anymore. She was the commander of a rebellion, ready to fight for her people. "You're sure about this?" Elias asked Ravi, glancing around at the preparations. "This is Big. Like, really big. Ravi nodded, his eyes wide as he watched a group of warriors test their weapons. I've got a bad feeling about this. We're messing with something ancient. Something way bigger than we thought. I know, Elias said. But this is Celera's fight. And I'm in it now. We're all in it. Celera approached them, her expression serious. The time to move is now. We have found the coordinates to a hidden settlement where some of my people still live. But the Empire is searching for us. We cannot afford to wait any longer. Elias nodded, feeling a sudden weight settle on his shoulders. Let's go then. Terran stepped forward, holding a small device in his hands. These coordinates will lead us to the settlement, but it's not a simple path. The Empire's spies are everywhere, and we'll have to travel through dangerous territory. The old routes are still guarded. Ravi's eyes narrowed. Spies? You mean we'll have to sneak through enemy lines? Terran's grim expression didn't change. Yes, but it's our only choice. If we are to unite the lost factions, we must first reach them without alerting the Empire. Celera placed a hand on Elias' shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. We must trust that you both will lead us safely. Your knowledge of the stars and the ancient paths is invaluable. Elias swallowed, suddenly aware that the weight of this mission was not just about survival. It was about rebirth, about restoring an empire that had been lost to time. He had never asked for this, never imagined that he would be part of something so much larger than himself. But now he felt like there was no turning back. All right, he said, steeling himself. Let's move out. The group gathered their supplies, loading into the ship, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The warriors took their places, silent but resolute, as Celera sat in the command seat, her posture regal and commanding. The engines hummed to life, and the ship slowly lifted off, leaving the hidden moon behind. Elias looked out at the stars, the vast expanse of space stretching before them. They were heading into unknown territory, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a mission to survive. This was a mission to reclaim what had been stolen. We're coming for you, Empire, Celera whispered to herself, her golden eyes burning with resolve. And this time, you won't stop us. The hunt for the lost had begun. The stars stretched out before them as the ship moved through the cold, dark void of space. The journey was quiet, the crew focused, each person lost in their thoughts. Celera sat in the captain's chair, her golden eyes fixed on the distant horizon. Her mind was focused on the settlement they were about to reach, but there was still the shadow of the Empire hanging over them. The Empire that wanted to crush her and everything she had once ruled. Elias leaned against the wall, staring out at the stars, his mind racing. It was hard to believe how quickly things had escalated. One moment, he was a simple archaeologist on a routine dig, and now he was part of a rebellion led by a lost princess who was determined to take back an empire. Ravi walked up to Elias, a concerned look on his face. You good, man? Elias shrugged. I don't know. It feels like we're heading into a storm we can't outrun. Ravi smirked. Yeah, no kidding. But if we don't do this, we're all dead anyway. Elias nodded grimly. True. I just never thought I'd end up leading a charge against an empire. Before Ravi could respond, the ship's sensors beeped urgently. Terran, who had been monitoring the console, turned sharply. We've got company. Elias's heart raced. Who? Empire Patrol, Terran said, his voice tight. They must have found our trail. We need to get out of here. Celera stood, her calm demeanor unshaken. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We cannot let them catch us. Ravi jumped into the pilot's seat, his hands moving quickly over the controls. We're not exactly equipped for a dogfight, but I'll give it a shot. The ship shook as enemy ships appeared on the scanners. 3 warships, their sleek black hulls gleaming in the darkness of space. They were closing in fast. The Empire had found them. Terran moved quickly, grabbing a weapon from a nearby compartment and securing it to his side. "We will hold them off. You need to get to the settlement." Zelera shook her head. "No, I will not run again." "We don't have time for a fight, Zelera," Elias said, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to escape." But Zelera's eyes blazed with determination. "I will not be hunted. Not again." Before anyone could stop her, she moved to the weapons console. Her hands moved over the controls, and a bright pulse of energy shot out from the ship, striking one of the enemy warships. The blast sent the enemy ship spiraling off course, its systems failing. "That's what I'm talking about," Ravi shouted, pushing the throttle forward. But we're not out of the woods yet. The remaining 2 warships adjusted their course, opening fire once again. But Zelera's power was not done. She reached out, her golden tattoos glowing brighter than ever, and another pulse shot out, striking the second warship. It began to break apart, pieces flying off as it was disabled. The last warship hesitated, unsure whether to continue the fight. Zelera, her gaze cold and focused, addressed them. "Leave now, or face the same fate." The enemy ship's engine sputtered, and then it turned, retreating into the distance. The battle was over, for now. Ravi exhaled, wiping his brow. "I think we just made a statement." Elias looked at Zelera, his respect for her growing. "You're a lot more than just a princess." She gave him a small, fierce smile. "I am the last of my bloodline, and I will not let my people fall into darkness." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The Empire might have retreated, but they would not stop. They would keep coming for her, and now they had no choice but to fight back, all the way. The journey to the settlement continued, but Elias knew that from here on out, nothing would be the same. The rebellion was no longer just about survival, it was about victory, and they were ready to win. The ship finally entered the atmosphere of the hidden settlement, a small, secluded planet nestled in the outer reaches of the galaxy. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, untouched by the war that raged beyond the stars. Trees with silver leaves swayed gently in the breeze, and the air was thick with the scent of unknown flowers. It was peaceful, almost surreal. But Elias knew that peace would be short-lived. The Empire would come for them. Zelera stood at the front of the ship, her gaze fixed on the planet below. The moment of truth had arrived. Her people, the last of her loyal followers, were scattered across the land, hidden from the Empire's watchful eyes. It was here, in this quiet corner of the universe, that she would begin to unite them. "Are we ready?" Elias asked, stepping up beside her. Zelera nodded, her face set with determination. "We have no choice. This is our last chance." The warriors who had followed Zelera from the hidden moon prepared to disembark. They had trained in secret, lived in exile for so long, but now they were ready to fight. Each one wore the same look of quiet resolve. They would not fail her. Terran approached Elias, his voice low. "We've made contact with some of the scattered factions. They are ready to join us, but it will take time to rally them all. The Empire is closing in fast." Elias looked toward the sky, where distant lights flickered. The Empire's ships were already in orbit, and their presence was growing stronger by the minute. "We don't have much time then." Terran nodded. "We'll have to act quickly. Once they know we're here, there's no turning back." The ship touched down on a small clearing in the forest, and the warriors disembarked, immediately fanning out to secure the area. Zelera took one last look at the horizon before turning to Elias. "We need to meet with the leaders of the factions. They must see that we are united, or they will not follow." Elias nodded. "Then let's go. The sooner we act, the better." As they made their way through the dense forest, Zelera's golden tattoos shimmered in the sunlight, her presence both regal and commanding. She was the lost princess, yes, but now she was much more. She was the leader of a rebellion, and the weight of her destiny rested on her shoulders. The journey was long, but eventually they reached the gathering place, an ancient temple, long forgotten, now serving as a meeting point for those who still believed in Selara's cause. Inside, the leaders of the scattered factions waited. They were wary, their eyes filled with doubt. Selara stepped forward, her voice steady and strong. "I have returned. The Empire has hunted us for far too long. But now it ends. I will not let my people suffer any longer. We fight for freedom, for the future of our bloodline, and for the legacy of the eternal throne." Her words echoed through the temple, and for the first time in a long time, the leaders of the factions stood together. One by one, they pledged their loyalty to her. The rebellion was united. But the sound of distant ships approaching snapped them back to reality. The Empire had found them. "We don't have any more time," Elias said, his voice urgent. "The Empire is here." Selara turned toward the warriors. "Prepare yourselves. This is the final stand." The sky above darkened as the Empire's ships descended. There was no turning back now. They would either win this battle or die trying. But Selara knew one thing for sure: she would never give up. The battle for her throne, for her people, and for the galaxy had begun. And this time, the Empire would fall.